Hi there, Prairie Plant Girl here. Well, welcome back to my greenhouse. In an earlier video, I had shown you that I had built myself a greenhouse this fall, and I promised some videos to go into a little bit more detail about how that process went. So I thought we would break it up into two parts. So this video today is going to be kind of about the planning process and getting ready to make my greenhouse. So if you're new to my channel, I garden in Saskatchewan, Canada, which is growing zone 3B, and I have about 110 frost-free growing days. So having a greenhouse is something that I have dreamt of for years. I don't even want it so much to grow things over the summer season, though I'm sure I will, so much as to be able to get things started and outside a little bit earlier in the spring, and to hopefully get some fall crops going a little bit further into the autumn and maybe even into the beginning of winter before I have to really shut things down. We can get down around minus 35 Celsius here, so it gets really cold in the winter. I don't plan on heating this through the winter, so I certainly don't expect to be growing things in here over the winter season. It's not completely airtight. You might even be able to see behind me, I have some gapping between some windows and things. It's things that I will be working on and dealing with, but for now, I'm just really happy to have the structure out of the wind. It's minus 10 Celsius outside right now. It's -1 in my greenhouse. Most days it gets up above freezing in here, even though it's quite cold outside. We just have a little bit of scattered clouds today that's slowing it down, and quite a bit of a wind outside. So it's blowing through because, like I said, it's not really sealed up yet. I've had plastic covered greenhouses, little like kind of cold frames with metal frames and a little plastic cover for many years. I have had a great one that I've really enjoyed using, but I'd have to take it down every fall because I just don't think it would hold up to our snow loads. I had to take the plastic off every fall, put it away, put it back out, and it wasn't very attractive, so I try and kind of tuck it back in a corner of my yard. And so sometimes where it was going, the ground would get flooded if we had heavy rains, and the ground would wash out from below it. Plants, trees, things, they'd take a tumble, and it can be really devastating when you've put a lot of effort and work into some plants and they're falling. And it was also, because of the type of plastic on it, it just didn't bring the heat in the same way and hold the heat in the same way that a glass greenhouse will. And it was loud to try and do any filming or anything in. So it worked, but it wasn't quite what I wanted. What I really dreamed of was having a window greenhouse. I looked at many different types of greenhouses. Like I said, I'd had the plastic frame type before, and like I said, they do their job for what they're intended to do in my climate. I did some research and I looked at the greenhouse kits that you can buy. There's lots that you can get that are with the plastic kind of windows that are double walled. Some of them are triple wall. And I looked at those a lot. I read reviews, kind of watched videos and things. And I did a lot of research on what qualities were positives and negatives in different types of greenhouses, including like the hoop house style, the glass window style, the polyurethane or plexiglass type style. And I came to the conclusion the hoop style one, well, I just didn't like the look of it. So that wasn't something I was going to spend any more money on than the small version that I had already. So I knew that was out. And then with our kind of climate that we have here, to have a permanent structure that, you know, out all year round, it had to be able to stand up to high winds and heavy snow loads. So I really didn't feel like the little polyurethane or plexiglass, I'm not sure what that's called, I can't remember what those windows are. I didn't feel like those kits really held up from what I'd seen. It sounded like the panels would pop out of them. The frames are really quite light. You have to build a really heavy base to secure them down to, so that's added cost on top of the frame and the structure itself. And I didn't love the looks of them. And the more I looked into them, you know, for my climate, you'd want to go with something that had the double walls, which is like basically there's like kind of like little air channels between the plastic pieces that's sandwiched in there. And from what I read, it sounded like water got in those channels and algae grows, and then they're really difficult to clean. And it just seemed like there's a lot of cons to me for that type of product, for the money that they were asking for here in Canada. Now, I know in some places you can get them quite inexpensive, but here they aren't really that inexpensive for a larger size like I would have wanted. So I have been watching for years for some wooden windows. I've watched on like the buy and sell sites, and told people that I knew, if you know of anywhere that had lots coming out, you know, I'd be interested in them. And this spring, I heard that there was somewhere that was going to be getting an upgrade for their windows for their building. They had wooden windows, they're single pane windows, and that was exactly what I wanted. I mean, I didn't need them to be single pane, I would have been happy with double pane, but beggars can't be choosers. And I could have those windows for free, I just needed to take them out of the building. So I went down with my tools and pulled off the trim and that, and I was lucky because they were redoing the windows and retrimming them and everything, so I could just get in there and pull them off. And each window was actually 2 windows. So on the outside there was a single pane in a wooden frame, and directly behind it on the inside of the building was another single pane with a wooden frame around it for every single set of windows. And they were taking out 4 sets of windows. So I managed to get a lot of windows, and I can't remember now, I counted in my last video. So I believe it's 26 windows that I pulled out of that building, because even though it was 4 window spaces, several of them were like a large window in the center with 2 smaller windows on the side. So that all added up to 26 windows. So that was really nice, and I couldn't believe I was able to get them all out without breaking them, and managed to get them back to my house without breaking them. And they sat under my deck for a long time, and none of them broke. So I had the windows. Now I needed a plan of what to actually do with these windows, because I'm not a carpenter, and I needed to figure out how to actually make this giant pile of windows into a greenhouse. So I started by measuring all the windows, and like I said, they all kind of were matching sets. So I had at least 2 the same size of each style, and some of them, because of how the windows were in the building, there were several that were pretty much the same size of each kind of size of window. So I measured them all, and none of them were exact. I think they had been kind of custom built or cut. Who knows, maybe they were used when they went in that building, because they were all just slightly different sizes, and some of them had slopes to their frames. They had extra pieces put on and screwed on, and some of them were pretty wonky. But I just did my best to kind of measure and get a pretty good idea of some general sizing of what I had for windows. And then I sat down and started kind of playing with how I wanted the greenhouse laid out. Because I'm in a northern climate, I really just wanted to get 3 sides of my structure windows. I wasn't worried about the roof being windows, and I wasn't worried about the back. I had decided beforehand with all my research that I wanted a roof that sloped from south to north. And the north, the back of my yard is facing north, so that worked well. And I wanted it taller in the front to get lots of that southern exposure. And then I have full windows on the east and west sides as well to get that morning sun and that afternoon sun. But my biggest sun exposure is to the south, and that's what I wanted. So I kind of sat down and played with it. I had to decide where I wanted the door. Did I want the door facing towards the grassy part of my yard and towards my house? Did I want it facing more towards my main garden area behind me? How did I really want to set this up? I had already kind of picked in my head a long time ago the spot in my yard, because I didn't have a lot of areas that really worked for a greenhouse. So I have it back in an area where I'd been growing for years. I knew I got lots of good sunshine. It's close to my garden. It's accessible with water. It's accessible to electricity. And it's close to my house if I want to be running trays of plants out. Now, I don't have a giant yard, so nowhere is overly far from anything in my yard, but I do have a good sized yard. So I wanted to have access to all the spaces, have it somewhat centralized. I didn't want big trees over it, not so much because of them shading the greenhouse, because again, I want to be using this mostly in the shoulder seasons when there shouldn't be a lot of leaves on the trees, but I didn't want big branches on the trees hanging down and hitting into the greenhouse in a windstorm, or possibly breaking and falling on the greenhouse. So I do have some trees nearby, but none I think are going to get big enough to actually hit and break out the windows. Here's hoping anyways. It was late April when I got the windows out and back to my house. So in May, as I was pondering all these things with the knowledge that I had, I needed to drop this plan. So I measured, like I said, the windows as carefully as I could, and I just started kind of playing around with the sizes. And I drew a lot of different plans until I could figure out something that was going to work, that I thought I could build, because I really didn't know how much extra help I would have with building it. I'm not a carpenter. I don't know what I'm really doing. I know some basic framing. I've helped my husband and I've built a few framed in a few basements and things before, finished them. I've done a little bit of, work around the yard, or I've built my garden beds and a few planters, but nothing on this scale. So I started with my biggest windows first, and I decided I wanted my door to be on the front of the greenhouse. Hopefully you can see it here, but I'll probably do a better shot. So I just centered my door, and I played with a few things. I tried putting it off to the side and different things, but then I put my largest windows on the south side around the door, and it worked. And that's kind of how I determined. I knew a basic kind of size that I wanted in my head, but that's how I kind of wound up with the size of the front and the back walls, was how it worked to get a door in there with my biggest windows. Now, I was lucky, and a lot of my windows worked out that I could turn them and manipulate them to get even windows down both sides and have them matching, and I really liked that. Now, like I said before, I looked at putting the door off to the side or offsetting it a little bit, but I thought about how I wanted to use the greenhouse inside, and I thought for me, I would rather have the door in the center, and then I'd be able to open it and have the potting benches inside without the door taking up space of potting benches. It would kind of swing in the middle, because I wanted it to swing in, because I felt like if I was coming from the house with trays of plants and my arms were full, it would be easier to kind of quickly unlatch the door holding things and just kind of give the door a push in than trying to get a hold of it and pull it out and work my way around it especially if it was windy or something out. So that's why I decided to go with a swinging indoor. I figured I'd have lots of potting benches and tables inside year round, so if I needed to set things down to get the door open and swung out to leave, I could do that. Now how I'm going to get it closed again, I guess it'll be a kind of just hoping or coming back to do that, but that was my thinking on having it swing in. So once I got that front wall figured out, and I got that gave me the height I knew I wanted to have. I kind of played around with 1 foot or 2 feet height of just kind of like no windows at the bottom. To just have somewhere, where I might store some pots or things under shelves and it wouldn't be just visible. And I don't need sun shining right down to the ground. I'm not planning on putting in-ground planting in here. So I just kind of played around with that until I got something that I thought wasn't going to be too obtrusively tall, but still worked for what I wanted with the windows that I had. And really that front wall is what decided that size. So at first I was thinking I was going to have about a 2-foot kind of space at the bottom with no windows, but with the height of the windows that I was using stacked up, that would have been too high. So I went down to 1 foot and did it that way. And to me, that made it much more reasonable. So I'm just looking at my plans here. And so with the windows and the framing, without the roof on, that made the front wall 7 feet 5 inches tall. So that'll give you, because in my last video, I kind of just gave some estimated heights. And then the wall itself is 10 feet 2 inches wide. So it's a good size space in that direction. So then that was the easy part. That was just 6 windows and kind of figuring out, I measured my exterior doors in my house to kind of guess the size of a door, but I was going to build one anyways. So I just kind of guessed a rough opening, and I also measured my wagon, my gorilla cart that I use in the garden in case I wanted to be pulling it in and out. I measured to make sure that that door opening would fit my gorilla cart, and it should. So that was kind of where I went to try and figure out how much room to leave for the door. And then I just stacked those windows that all wound up being, I believe they're all 40 inches wide. And I just stacked 3 windows and went with that. So that was actually the easiest wall. Well, maybe the back was the easiest, but the side walls were a little more complicated because I had a lot of different sizes of windows now, and I needed to make them work. So what I did is I just tried to start from the bottom. And again, I was going with that 1 foot to match the front. And I just went and tried to find kind of my bigger windows to put towards the front side of the greenhouse and my taller windows towards the front side. Because remember, I was trying to get a slope on my roof. So I just kind of started moving and drawing them in different spots until I could kind of make it work. And in my drawing, I wound up with, so of course I would have had that front height of 7 feet 5 inches. And then the back wound up being 5 feet 9 inches. And then the width of the wall was 9 feet on either side. Now that side wall got kind of played around with, that original plan got played around with and messed with a little bit as I tried to make the roof angle better to shed snow better and just to play with some of my window sizes and just to optimize it as best I could. But that's where I started with that. And then my back wall, like I said, I wasn't looking to put a lot of windows in it, but my dad offered me, he had a couple of vinyl windows, and he had said, if you want these, you could use those. And so I looked at them because I was kind of wishing I had something to go in the back. And the one was really, really big, and I didn't want that. I thought it would just be too big for the space and what I wanted to do with my greenhouse. And because I really didn't need that back window, it wasn't going to be providing a lot of light for growing the plants. It was more just so I decided to put a workbench that I had in my shed into my greenhouse so I could do some potting and things on it. And I thought it would work nice like that. And so I wanted it against the back wall, and I thought it would be nice to have a window just so I could kind of look outside and have that window there instead of looking at a wall. So I chose the smaller of the 2 windows that he had. And because they were vinyl, I wasn't exactly sure the way they were built, how I was going to put it in, but it was a free window, so I took it and thought, I will figure this out later, and I did. So otherwise, the back wall was just framing, and like I said, I just did basic framing, you know, just kind of spaced my 2x4s evenly with a header like with a top board and a bottom board, and just spaced my 2x4s evenly, made a frame that would fit around that window, and put some support beams underneath it with 2x4s, and that was my framing for the back wall. And that was how I drew those up and how I figured it out. It was just a lot of playing around, measuring, reworking, and trying to fit the windows I had into a space that would work for me. The roof, I really wasn't sure how to do. And my brother is a carpenter, and so I actually was asking him about some help for trying to figure out how much wood I would need for it, and I showed him my plans. I wanted his idea of what I had drawn up was doable, if it made sense, if it was enough support for the windows, etc., etc. I just needed, you know, a set of eyes that knew what they were looking at, like to look at it and just let me know if I was completely going in the wrong direction with this. And he said that the whole plan looked pretty good, except that the roof, my sidewalls, I don't know, I'd done something weird with, I turned the 2x4 on its side for some reason. I don't remember why I had done that at the top board. And so I was trying to make a roof work with that. So he just kind of gave me some tweaks for that, and he drew out a roof plan for me somewhere. Doesn't matter. He drew out a basic roof plan for me, and he suggested, because I originally had all my main beams from my roof going from front to back, and he suggested it'd be easier to go side to side, because from front to back I was going to have to figure out that angle because my roof was sloped, and cut that on all of my boards, because I didn't want my roof overhanging. I just wanted it straight with the walls so that I wasn't shading the building. So they would be sitting on the inside of the front and back wall. And so he said, instead of having to cut all those angles, go side to side, make it easier on myself, and then put the cross braces in, and they'll work better that way without having to angle and do it that way. And then it could sit on top the side walls a little bit. Doesn't matter. But anyway, so he just kind of showed me an easier way and helped me with that. So these windows, when I got them, were in okay shape, I guess. Structurally, they were good. There was two that had kind of larger cracks through them, and I think there was one or two that had really small cracks just in the corners, but none of them had actual broken pieces missing or anything. The actual wood was in pretty good shape. They weren't too rotten out or anything, but the paint was peeling. Some of the like kind of caulking, or I think it's called chinking, that's like goes on the exterior of the window to help kind of keep water moving away from the wood when it rains or snow melts or anything. Some of that was missing in places. It had been repaired in some places. And they needed a good going over. So I sanded them down. I sanded them all down. Some of them right to bare wood completely. Some of them just down through layers and layers of paint, and then to where I could work with them. And then I primed them all, and I painted them. And I tried to do around all the edges, the sides, the front, the back, and even the sides that wouldn't be showing. Now, in the end, some of that got cut off because I still hadn't cut the windows down to size perfectly. So maybe I should have waited on that. I don't know, but I have some now that have raw edges, because when it came to putting it together, I just didn't get that done. But so I got them all sanded and primed and painted. And I went around, actually my husband helped me at first, because I've never had good coordination using a caulking gun. But we got some, it's a caulk with silicone in it. I think it's like DAP brand or something, I'm not sure. To just put around that exterior edge of the glass against the wood there, just to help, again, seal that back up. But actually we had a new caulking gun that we were trying, and it actually worked really well. So I wound up doing some of that on my own later on. So I'll put a link to that if I can find it on Amazon. So if you're looking for something, I don't know if it would work. I don't think it would work for bigger tubes, and I'm not sure it would work for like cardboard tubes of caulk and that, but for the plastic, the smaller plastic ones, it worked really well for me. I found it really easy, whereas I feel like sometimes the others are just, they just take too much coordination. You can't get it shut off, or, you know, like take the pressure off. I just don't have the coordination or the reach or whatever to get the pressure off, and so things are squirting out before I make it a mess everywhere. Anyways, side note on that. But so I got the windows all cleaned up and ready to go, and I piled them all up back under my deck and just waited till it was time until I could get some wood and get the greenhouse put up. So then I needed to buy the wood, but I still, you know, like I said, this isn't what I do for a living. I don't know. I was really not sure about myself. And so my husband said, well, why don't you just lay out the windows for each side and measure, you know, measure it all out and just make sure that it works, so you'll be able to visualize it better. And I thought, well, that's brilliant. And so I took and I laid the windows out for each wall. So I started, I think, with the front window, and I laid them out, and I used the 2x4, so just some scrap wood that I had laying around, to just kind of put in between the windows and measure it out. Now again, my windows weren't trimmed yet at this point, so they weren't perfectly sized, but it sure gave me a lot better visual understanding of how it was going to look and how it was going to work. And, you know, if I needed to add any extra boards in or anything. And when I laid out my sideboards, I think it was at that point where I decided I had these tall windows beside each other. There was 4 lined up along each side. And I had 2x4s in between every single one. And I was having trouble just making the width of the wall work and get the slope I needed on the roof. There's just a few different things. It just wasn't quite working out. I think that's part of why I had that side wall, the top plate of the side wall kind of turned sideways. I was trying to make that work. And so again, my husband said, well, why don't you just take out, because these are small windows, they're not, like, it's not gonna hurt. They don't need that extra support of that extra 2x4 in there. It's not necessary. So why don't you take that out and just put 2 of them, just put 1 2x4, so you have the front frame of the wall, 2 of these tall, skinny windows, 1 2x4, and 2 tall, skinny windows, and another 2x4, and put them that way. So you're eliminating, you know, that extra, like, 3 inches, basically doing that. And when I did that, that little bit helped to make things work a lot better. And actually, we wound up putting that little, like I said, that solid piece of wall at the bottom. The sides originally were supposed to be 1 foot in height, and now I believe they're 7 inches. So we just took a little bit out of that, and that just brought everything down, made the roof slope work, and I felt confident. All of a sudden, it all just worked. That was the plan. Hopefully, it wasn't just a long, rambling story. Hopefully, it gave you some ideas if you're looking to plan on your own. You know, I'd say the most important thing is to just measure, 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 and have other sets of eyes look at what you're doing, because they might see things just a little bit more differently than you, and they might help you out a little bit. Look, research, figure out for your climate what kind of orientation is the best orientation, and really think about what kind of structure is best for what you need. Think about, as you're planning the outside, how you want to use it on the inside. I actually drew myself a drawing. I drew a the inside footprint with my workbench that I wanted at the back and my my plant benches that I figured I would want on the sides to hold my plant trays. And you know, I even put in, like, I doubt I'll put them in this year, maybe I never will, but I put in some rain barrels on the inside, so if I wanted to route water in and have water inside, I could. I don't think I'll ever do that. I think that'll be storage space for shelving. But it gave me a good idea of how much space I would have inside. I toyed around with putting a table in the middle. That would be much too cramped when it's full of plants. But I just really thought about how I wanted to use the space and what I wanted inside the space, as well as the windows that I had and what kind of materials I wanted to use for it. And I think that's the best way to go. And then you can decide on the type of structure you want, how much money you want to spend, how big you want it. I would say always go a little bit bigger than you want, a little bit bigger than you think you want. I know I had an 8x6 before, and it seemed just really tiny. And this won't be a lot bigger, but it was about as big as I could go in my space. Yeah, and measure, and be willing to change your plan if you need to. So at this point, I was about $50 into the project, and I still had to buy wood and some screws and get it built. So if you want to know how the whole project finally came together and got built and how much I spent in the end, you'll have to check out the next video, and that's where we'll see you. Thanks for watching. Bye.